Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Big Questions, Small Steps. My name is Amanda, and I'm so glad that you could join me today. Today, we are gathered to celebrate or finalize the last of the series talking about Islam and why it just didn't work for me. Today, we're going to talk about the Quran. So far, we've talked about the view of God, we've talked about Muhammad, and we've talked about the treatment of others. So, if you're ready to talk about the Quran, let's hit the intro and we'll begin. So, within Islam, they have this book known as the Quran. The Quran is reportedly, according to Muslim followers, that it was given by God to Moses at Mount Sinai, or a version of that, which was called the Torah. And they believe at the same time it was also given to the Prophet Muhammad when Muhammad was in a cave meditating by himself. Okay, now my amazing boyfriend has taught me many things. One of the main things that he's taught me is to question. And whenever anyone says something happened and no one is around to see this happen, to just be skeptical. Don't just completely write them off, but be skeptical and just question, could anything else have happened? So when Muhammad apparently received the Quran, he was an illiterate man, could not read, could not write. And while he was meditating in this cave, he received this vision. He started sweating and convulsing, and this angel apparently came to him and pressed him so hard and said, "Read these words from Allah." And he said, "I can't read." And he grabbed him again. And he said, "Read these words from Allah." And he said, "I can't read." And he let him go again. And he pulled him again one more time. And he held him tight. And he said, "Read these words from Allah." And Muhammad said, "I can't read." And then he let him go and said, "These words from Allah have been written on your heart. Go and teach the others." Nobody was there. Even in his biography, Muhammad states he wasn't sure what was going on. He didn't know if he was possessed by a demon. He didn't say anything to anybody for a while. But he apparently had this Quran, which is hundreds of pages written on his heart. And he's just supposed to reiterate this to all these people perfectly. And all of it is from God. Okay. Now, I don't know about you. My memory is pretty good at times, but I frequently walk into rooms and forget why I'm there sometimes. When I'm looking at a recipe, I need to keep that recipe up so I remember the steps and the ingredients and how much of each thing, because I will forget. That's a recipe. They're typically 1 page long. I can't imagine a person having hundreds of pages imprinted on their heart and they would just know it and be able to recite it perfectly. And how, if they are illiterate, how would they be able to tell that what was written down was accurate? Maybe the person who was doing the writing made some spelling mistakes. Maybe they misunderstood. Maybe they misheard. Maybe there was a smudge on the page. There's so many maybes that it's tough to wipe that away. There's a lot of There's a lot of questions there. And it doesn't stop there. It says that in different versions that the Quran was impressed on Muhammad's heart at one time. It also says that God revealed additional truths to him over the next 23 years. And so he had to go back and make edits or corrections. Okay. The Quran was written through Muhammad by multiple scribes. Again, people make mistakes. And if Muhammad is illiterate and he can't check to see if they're accurate, that's a lot of room for error. That's a lot of room for error. At one point it says in the Quran that an angel tried to come and he couldn't because he was afraid of the dog that was at the foot of the tent. So that's why they don't have dogs. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be dog. Maybe it was supposed to be a hog. Maybe it was supposed to be a boot. Maybe it was something else. It's such a small thing, but it's also such a huge thing. For any man, woman, or child to write down something that happened in its entirety, with every detail precise, is a rarity. There's a reason that when you are in an accident or if you have a situation happen, they encourage you to write your statement as soon as possible, they being the police, because you will forget things. It may be a traumatic event and you're wiping it from your mind. You will miss certain items. You will find holes. The longer you wait to record something, you will miss certain details. It took Muhammad 23 years to write this down, and we're to believe that he didn't miss any details? That the scribes recorded it perfectly without failure? There were no mistakes? That's a hard sell. That's a hard sell. I'm going to admit it. Now, it also is important to know that the Quran, as they use it now, wasn't finalized until 20 years after Muhammad's death. So Muhammad had this Quran imprinted on his heart. He shared different things for 23 years. Different versions were out there. And it wasn't until 20 years after that they figured out, okay, I think it's done now. We can close the book. What were they doing the 20 years after he died? Were they rewriting? Were they adding things? Were they editing? What was happening in those 20 years? We know that at one point, a goat ate some of the pages. So we don't know what that was about. But yet they have this book that they say is from God. The math doesn't make sense. I can't imagine describing 20 years after his death is when the Quran was done. He wrote the Quran over 23 years. About 23 years ago, I would have been about 21. I can tell you bits and pieces of what happened when I turned 21. I cannot tell you word for word, action for action, hour by hour even, what happened when I turned 21. it's so much, there's so much room for error that it just doesn't make sense to me. The goat eating pages of the Quran made me laugh. Absolutely. It made me laugh. And there were different versions, as I said. I don't know how the different versions came to be, but I know that at one point they decided that they would take passages from the Talmud, which is the Jewish Bible and Jewish dissertations of different things, and they would pull different verses and they would use them in the Quran and they would cite them in the Quran. But then later they would say, oh, the Jews are the people of the book, but the Jews have corrupted the Torah. Don't trust it. We're going to use it, but don't trust it. What? They're talking out of both sides of their mouth. It doesn't make sense. Now, could I be a little bit slighted because, yes, I'm on the conversion path to Judaism? Yeah. But they also say the same thing about the Bible, that it's corrupt. But when you press them on, okay, well, what part was corrupted? When was it corrupted? They can't answer that. But the fact that their religion can't stand without Judaism because it's in their Quran. The Quran references the Jewish people as the people of the book. That makes it hard to believe. That, okay, knowing what I know, that God would have given the Jewish people the Torah. Okay? He gave them, the Jewish people, the Torah. According to the Muslims, he also gave Muhammad the Quran at the same time. Okay, so why would they then say, okay, these people were given the Torah, and pull verses from the Torah and put them in your book and then flip it and say, oh, the Torah is corrupt, don't use that? It doesn't make sense. Help it make sense, because I don't get it. Likewise, they say that Jesus was the prophet. Jesus was the prophet, but he wasn't the end prophet. He wasn't the Son of God. So there are parts that they will reference about the Christian Bible, but that's also corrupt. Don't pay attention to that. What? Then why are you bringing it up? I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I tried very hard, but I don't get it. Speaking about them saying that Jews have corrupted the book, they say in there, they corrupt the word, meaning they altered or changed its meaning, yet no one is able to change even a single word from any book of God. So in the Jewish custom, you can't add or subtract from the Torah, which is why the Torah scrolls are the Torah scrolls. And if you go to a synagogue in Chicago or Israel or Belize, they will all be the exact same. They will all be written in Hebrew. They will all be the exact same. They can't add or subtract. They don't have vowels in it because they didn't use vowels back then. It's just consonants. They cannot add or subtract. That's not the case with the Quran. That's not the case with the Bible. There's different versions of the Bible. There's different versions of the Quran. Now, at one point, there were different versions of the Quran. Let me correct that. They got all the Qurans together, apparently, in some big committee, and they decided, oh, I don't like this version, I don't like this version, I don't like this version. Okay, this one out of the 20, that's the one that's going to be the Quran. All the other ones they burned. Okay, what did they not like about the other Qurans? They don't say that. How do they know that all the other Qurans were destroyed? That were out there. How do they know? What made them pick that one? Again, asking questions is not a bad thing. As my love says, the truth doesn't mind being questioned. So, what's the answer? I'd love to know. I'd love to know. So many different versions, many different books of the Quran. There's just so many questions that don't make sense. I don't like how the Quran talks about the treatment of other people. I don't like that they make Muhammad be at the same level as God, and that Muhammad is God's voice here on earth. I also don't like that they praise Jesus as a prophet. According to my understanding, like I've always had problems with Jesus, and I'll get into that in the next episode, so I'll just stop it there. In my opinion, Jesus was not a prophet. In my study, Jesus is not a prophet. When I was in Christianity, Jesus was part of the Trinity, and he was a big part of all of my worship spaces. But I've got a problem with Jesus. So, I think that might be a pretty great transition. So we'll just stop it there. So that wraps up our discussion about Islam and why it just doesn't work for me. In our next episode, we're going to start talking about Christianity and why that doesn't work for me anymore. The questions I have, the learning that I've done, the reasons why it just doesn't fit for me anymore. So, if you enjoyed today's presentation, please hit that like button, hit that follow, and subscribe button, because there's always more learning to do. And the more we know, the more we grow. Can't wait to see you again next time. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.